We'll pull through. We will persevere. Wonderful. Hello, everyone. As Katie mentioned, my name is Calvin Remsburg, and I focus here at Network Palo Alto with all things related to network automation. And what we wanted to do with this session today is to provide some insights as to where customers are adopting automation, some of the things that they're attacking with automation, as well as how they need to structure their organization to take the full benefits. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to start by giving a little bit of a high-level overview around the world of automation, because we do recognize that not everybody on this call is familiar with this world. So this will be more of a high-level overview around the practices around network automation, and we'll set the table for more technical conversations later. So what are organizations looking for when they decide to embrace network automation? Well, we've categorized it in these three different pillars. The first is on speed, which is kind of an obvious thing. If you think about automation, one of the things that you think about is that this is going to be able to do the task much faster than we are. But it goes a little bit deeper than that. Specifically, in the world of network security automation, speed can be a critical factor in determining and responding to specific security threats that are taking place. But it's not just that as well. Security automation can also help us improve the speed by allowing for our security tasks to be executed quickly and consistently. There's also a focus on the operations side of the house. Specifically, network security automation can help us streamline traditional security operations by automating routine tasks such as patch management, enforcing policies across all different parts of our environment, as well as responding to specific incidents. This ultimately can help us reduce the workload of our security personnel and allow them to focus on more complex and more strategic tasks. Now, honestly, I mean, we are Palo Alto Networks, so we focus a lot around security and protection. And at the end of the day, the ultimate goal of security network automation is to protect the organization from threats. By embracing automation for routine security tasks, organizations can reduce the amount of risk of human error and ensure that those security policies are enforced consistently across their environment. Now, additionally, automated security tools can often detect and respond to threats more quickly, and providing a better protection for our organization and our data. So with a little bit of understanding as far as the value proposition of automation, what I'd like to do now is to kind of shift the conversation to focus on what are the fundamental concepts that we focus on within the automation space. Specifically, one of the things that stands out immediately is the need for standardization. Now, standardization is not unique to automation itself. Every organization struggles with this type of challenge, but it is specifically relevant whenever we need to embrace automation. And what do I mean by standardization? Well, it's effectively the process of establishing consistent and repeatable processes for performing our tasks. In the context of security automation, standardization will ensure that the tasks are performed in a consistent and repeatable manner. But it also helps simplify some of the training, and it makes things a little bit easier to troubleshoot. Now, orchestration is another key component that we focus on within this space. And it's just basically, it's the process of automating and coordinating multiple tasks across separate systems. This ultimately reduces the amount of time and effort that's required to perform these complex tasks that involve these different systems themselves. And kind of tying into that, there's a huge focus around the idea about building integrations. And specifically in this case, the integrations, it's the process of connecting in different systems or tools together to create a more efficient workflow, allowing for different systems and tools to work together seamlessly. But more importantly, you could argue more importantly, but it also helps streamline the process of sharing data and improving data accuracy. And nothing is more important in the automation world than ensuring that you've got accurate data. And finally, one of the things that we like to focus in on is this idea around continuous improvement, which is effectively the process of continually evaluating and improving our processes to ensure the efficiency and effectiveness of our automation. And then during this process, it also helps us identify additional opportunities for improving our automation and our workflows themselves. So these are kind of the four main pillars that we focus on when we look into the automation world. But let's talk a little bit about some of the best practices and where customers are having the most success with embracing automation. The first and probably one of the most important is to make sure that you start small. When you're embracing automation, don't try to boil the ocean in this case. By starting with small with our automation, it can provide your team with the ability to kind of dip their toe in the water and gain the experience before committing to larger automation initiatives. Starting with a small, low risk project, organizations can effectively build their confidence within the tools and implement automation and learn some really key valuable lessons that can be applied whenever you're ready to tackle a bigger initiative within your organization. Equally as important, though, is the idea of having clear and precise goals and outcomes of what your automation is going to deliver. This can make sure that whatever automation tool that's being developed within your organization is directly aligned with your business needs and objectives. As fun as it is to build the automation solutions, at the end of the day, we're here to provide value to our organization. And so by having clearly defined goals is going to make sure that the efforts that we're putting in are ultimately going to reap some value within our org. Again, harking on this idea around establishing standardization. Standardization for automation, again, it's going to provide the ability to have consistent and repeatable workflows across your automation. It's also going to help ensure that the data that you're feeding into this automation tooling is accurate, which is, again, one of the most important things when you're looking at building an automation framework. Standards also, again, help simplify just basic troubleshooting and operational awareness of things whenever you see a specific configuration or a specific tag on a resource. If you've got these standards defined, it can help your operations team quickly identify what that tag is and what it's actually doing within the environment. Now, I work for Palo Alto Networks, so I'm a little bit biased on this one, but please, with all earnestness, leverage your partners, leverage your vendors for support when embracing automation. By relying on us to help provide some support, it can make sure that your automation tools and your technologies are implemented correctly and in a way that aligns with our best practices. Additionally, the vendor support can also ensure that the automation tools are up to date and that you're able to take advantage of the latest features and capabilities themselves. And finally, it's crucial. It's absolutely crucial that we continue to perform continuous reviews on the automation that we put into place. Again, trying to make sure that the automation aligns with our business needs and other tangible benefits, as well as making sure that it's able to adapt to new technologies that come within your environment themselves. So there's a lot going on here, but I guess if I had to summarize, I would suggest that if you're looking to implement automation in your environment, make sure that you start small, you've got clear, precise goals, that standards have been defined, and that you align them directly with your business needs and outcomes. Now, finally, to kind of wrap up this section around just an overview around automation itself, I want to target specifically what needs happen to be, or what are some of the needs within an organization that need to be there in order to successfully embrace automation. So this is more targeted towards executive leaders and directors that are making changes within the environment, trying to embrace the culture of automation. These are four main components that I've seen consistently across our successful adopted customers around automation. And I feel like it's really important that we spend a little bit of time on this. Specifically, the idea around staff enablement doesn't come as too much of a surprise. We're effectively asking experts within the infrastructure and network security infrastructure world to effectively take on new skill sets entirely, a new career. So there must be an initiative internally to enable our resources, to enable our teams to develop these new technical skills around things like scripting, programming, and traditional software development skill sets. But also there needs to be, and this is probably, of all, this is probably the most important component, is there needs to be a strong focus on delivering collaboration amongst the teams within the organization. Traditionally, we saw customers in even organizations structured in silos around a specific technology, a specific domain of technology. Those pillars must come down. We must have collaboration between infrastructure administrators, such as those of us in the network security and cybersecurity world, and the actual teams that are developing the automation, so that we have a clear and precise idea as to what are the workflows and what's the desired outcome to be delivered by automation. So in collaboration will be paramount for success in embracing automation. Additionally, there needs to be some offer or support for resources for these teams that are looking to take on automation. And what I mean specifically in this case is that teams need to be able to have budgetary flexibility to assess new automation tools and products that are out there within the environment to see whether or not it solves some crucial problems within the organization, but also make sure that your team has dedicated time set aside for experimentation. This will not only help develop confidence within the automation tools, processes themselves, but also help dramatically reduce the amount of time of implementing automation into production. And finally, the teams need to be prepared to embrace a more adaptable way of doing things. They need to be aware of the possibility of change for solving some of the traditional network security automation workflows. So if their security responsibilities today might be with manual processes, they need to be aware and cognizant that things might change in the future, and they need to be flexible and adaptable to that. So without all the organizational conversations kind of taken aside, let's get into some specifics here around network security automation. Well, the way that we view this world is that there's effectively 4 separate functional categories for network automation. There's the deployment phase, the configuration phase, the response, and then the assessment phase. And each one of these has their own tools and workflows dedicated towards solving some of these problems. So let's talk a little bit about these categories before we dig into some specific examples. The first one around deployment. This is about automating the entire life cycle of our infrastructure devices. So that's like deploying new virtual firewalls, standing up new physical firewalls, replacing devices, performing upgrade processes around. But the idea is that through an automated pipeline, we're able to not only accomplish these tasks, but also include a full testing suite and validation throughout every stage within the process. In addition to the traditional, standing up and tearing down of the infrastructure itself, customers are also looking to automate things like end-of-life notifications or retirements of specific software features as well. So again, the deployment phase is specifically looking at the overall lifecycle maintenance of the infrastructure itself. Now, most of our customers are laser focused in on the configuration, and for good reason, right? When we traditionally look at cybersecurity and network security, at the end of the day, these products need to be configured in a specific way, or else they're not going to provide the value to the organization. So configuration is typically been a challenge, either from the human error risk of entering configurations, or just not knowing how to navigate certain vendor appliances. Customers are looking to fully automate these types of planned changes within the environment. And one of the practices that's really kind of taking off is this idea around infrastructure as code, which effectively enables the infrastructure administrators to define the intended state of resources like servers, firewalls, switches, and routers, and the tools will actually go implement them as they've declared within their code themselves. And it also involves using some of the traditional software development tools and workflows around version control systems, products like GitHub and GitLab, for maintaining the overall lifecycle of the actual code itself. And customers are embracing automation framework tools such as HashiCorp, Terraform, and Red Hat Ansible to help with this configuration management aspect itself, providing a higher level abstraction under the lower level ones and zeros of the actual programming languages themselves. So customers are finding that these higher level abstractions are of significant value. Now, the respond phase is of particular interest, especially within the security world, because there are many things that initiate or should be initiating automated responses. Specifically, this could be like our infrastructure is scaling up and scaling down, and we need to update security policies appropriately. But this can also be things like a specific type of log message was received, and we want to kick off an automated workflow that will do some investigation to gather specific intelligence and threat intelligence around these specific events. And finally, just to wrap up these 4 categories, the assess phase is another multifaceted one. There's many different aspects here, but what this effectively customers are doing is they're looking at talking to the APIs of these platforms, these firewalls and switches, and gathering all the data, all the relevant data that they would like, and using that to like stash it in products like ServiceNow for dashboarding or for auditing capability, or to create their own compliance reports based on the specific industry that they operate in. But it also includes things like the automated remediation of infrastructure as code products like, again, Terraform and Ansible before the actual deployment phase kicks off. The assess automation tools have the ability to identify security vulnerabilities or just potential risks to the actual infrastructure so that you can stop those security risks before they actually go into the production itself. Now, we here at Palo Alto Networks have spent a tremendous amount of effort into getting these 4 categories into our specific products, but we also expose the functionality through APIs. So let's navigate these waters just a little bit and talk about what we've done from a product perspective around these categories before we talk about the actual APIs themselves. So bootstrapping. Bootstrapping is this idea within the deployment phase that we are going to automate the instantiation of a device with some basic initial settings. Now, these can be settings around things like username and password, or a license, or network interface configuration. But the idea at the end of the day is that when this new workload comes online, the device is going to have just the basic parameters necessary in order for it to communicate out onto the actual network. Now, zero-touch provisioning is kind of a component, or I would say is actually a higher level abstraction on top of bootstrapping. And that the idea is that the new device, when it comes online, will be fully automated from its instantiation. So this will include the bootstrapping process itself, but will also include things like software installation and upgrade processes. It'll involve as well as pulling down the security policy and templates required for this firewall to perform its task. And at the end of the day, it's the ZTP process is going to reduce the amount of time and effort needed to provision our new firewall devices. Now, one of the fan favorites here at Palo Alto Networks is this idea around dynamic address groups. And what a dynamic address group, or a DAG, provides you at the end of the day, it's a group of IP addresses that can be dynamically changed based on specific events within the network environment. This automation of the creation and management of these address objects ultimately provides us value by ensuring that the firewall policies are always up to date with the latest information based on events that are taking place within the environment. And in a similar fashion, we have external dynamic lists, or EDLs that they're called. And similar to DAGs, they are a dynamic source of information, but this time it's coming from an external source that focuses on updating IP addresses that are effectively used within the firewall policies themselves. So by automating the management of these EDLs, this can provide us value by ensuring that the firewall policies are always up to date with the latest information based on categorization. The action-oriented log forwarding, this probably doesn't come as much as a surprise for anyone that's managed network security platforms in the past, but the idea here is that we're going to automatically forward specific security logs to a centralized location or tool where they can be analyzed and acted upon. This effectively improves the speed and effectiveness of our incident responses. In Prisma Cloud Automated Remediation, if you aren't aware, Prisma Cloud is a cloud security platform that provides automated remediation capabilities to help organizations address security issues within their cloud environments. So by automating the remediation process, this can reduce the amount of time and effort required to address security issues, improve our efficiency, and reduce the risk of data loss. We'll give a little bit more detailed explanation onto what that actually looks like soon. And the Cortex XOR playbooks. If you aren't aware, Cortex XOR is a security orchestration platform that provides the ability to automate security workflows and incident responses. So with using something like a Cortex XOR playbook, this can effectively improve the speed and effectiveness of our incident response, reduce the risk of data loss, and improve the overall network security posture. And finally, the best practice assessment. This is now a component within the AI ops for next-gen firewalls here at Palo Alto Networks. And it enables customers to measure their compliance with industry best practices and identify areas for improvement. The automated assessment process also reduces the time and effort required to conduct these assessments, improves the accuracy and the efficacy while identifying opportunities for improvement. So these are, again, these are the four main categories of network automation, and these are some of the product capabilities that we've incorporated across the board that enable these types of automated workflows. But I also want to focus in a little bit about product API examples, because this is where the DevOps and then the DevSecOps really comes into play. So from an API and an SDK perspective, we have PanOS APIs and SDKs, effectively enabling our customers to automate traditional tasks like firewall security policy management, network configuration, and security log analysis. And the same goes for Prisma Access as well, except with more of a focus around related to cloud-based security services, such as secure access to applications and data. We also have licensing APIs as well to obviously streamline the process of registering and requesting new security services via licensing. The Wildfire APIs that we expose are dedicated around automating the task around to analysis of potential threats and to the creation of threat intelligence itself. The Prisma Access Cloud APIs, again, Prisma Cloud is our tool for managing security compliance within cloud network infrastructures. Again, leading in here with APIs and SDKs available for this. And the same goes for our Cortex XDR and the Cortex XOR services as well. So depending on which type category that your team is looking at solving and addressing, if you've got the Palo Alto Network products within the environment, we provide these APIs and SDKs to help your teams embrace these automation techniques so that you can deliver success within your team. Okay, let's get into some technical details because that's what I like the most. Let's talk really briefly about some of the Palo Alto Networks automation platform so that you have a better understanding as why we're so excited about what can actually be done from an automation perspective here. So if you've never seen this before, at the end of the day, we have this operating system called PanOS, runs on all of our firewalls, and Panorama as well. And at the end of the day, whether you're using a graphical user interface or you're interacting with an SDK or the HTTP REST APIs or the CLI, everything comes in through this concept of what we call the XML API. This effectively gives you 100% use case coverage for whatever workflow that you need to do. We can perform it through this API construct here. So if you're looking to manage things like configuration, again, creating address objects for security policies, or configuring network services like IPsec VPNs, or if you're looking at performing system operations like patches and upgrades and reboots, or if you're just looking to pull data out, everything on our firewalls and Panorama management system effectively goes through this XML API. So at the end of the day, what this looks like when you're interacting with Palo Alto Networks automation, you're effectively going to be sending data or a request to an XML API structured in XML, and you'll get XML structured back. Now, we also recognize that And this is specifically true for those of us that come from more of a network security or a networking background itself. Not everyone is really excited about working with XML because it can be pretty complicated at the end of the day. So to still provide this kind of functionality to you, but by providing some abstraction layers, again, we provide SDKs and some of the more common programming languages out there. Things like Python, Golang, and PHP are some of the SDKs that we provide. We also provide HTTP-based endpoints as well that are specifically working with a JSON data structure. And JSON is arguably significantly easier to work with than XML at times, although there are some features and functionality with JSON that aren't available at XML. But just rest assured, like if you're looking to embrace automation, we've got the APIs and we've got the SDKs to help you get off the ground. And the same is true when you're interacting with some of our cloud-based services, such as Prisma, for instance. The only difference is, well, there's a couple of differences. One is that the authorization is using OAuth 2 instead of traditional API tokens and bearer tokens. It's now going to be using an OAuth 2 framework for authentication, and it's explicitly JSON through and through. So if you're not a big fan of working with XML, rest assured you can buy the XML requirement if you're going directly to the boxes, or if you're using some of our cloud-based services as well, you can also use JSON for that. So I guess at the end of the day, what I'm trying to suggest is that in addition to some of the built-in product features and APIs that we provide for our platforms, many of our customers are also building their own custom API integration with the automation tools within their environment. We support a wide variety of automation tooling options across our product portfolio, and we strive to be agnostic on the choice of tooling for the majority of use cases. We highly encourage our customers to use the automation tools that they're already familiar with and already in use within their teams or organizations. And we will work to provide the APIs and the necessary documentation, sorry about that, in order to facilitate the development of within these tools. Our central goal here at the end of the day is to make it easy and flexible as possible for you, our customer, and our partners to build these API integrations with our products to automate your security operations itself. All right, so let's get into some specific examples for these 4 main categories that we've listed out here. We're going to start with the deployment phase. Now, let's talk a little bit about what it would be to fully provision a new firewall, a new physical firewall within the ZTP process of a deployment phase. Now, again, ZTP focuses on simplifying this onboarding and deployment phase of our firewalls across multiple sites without the need for technical staff at each location. Effectively, branch employees can take the firewall out of the box and can connect it to the internet and local network, and the zero-touch provisioning process will complete after they've registered the device through a web portal using a claim key and serial number provided with the device. Once this device is registered, the firewalls will be automatically connected to their Panorama instance, reducing the amount of time and resources required for the initial onboarding and deployment, and obviously without requiring a tremendous amount of technical staff to be deployed across all of your infrastructure or across your organization. This streamlining of the process ultimately, again, helps you get your networks up, operational, and secure as quickly and efficiently as possible. Now, in contrast to the physical firewalls, when we look at this from a virtual firewall perspective, the process is just a little bit different here. The network administrator is instead going to create a clear text file, just a simple file in Notepad or something along that, that will declare the bootstrap definition. Again, basic parameters such as IP addresses and license authorization codes, etc. And once the VM series is deployed, it will then use that bootstrap mode to detect the file that has been created. And then it'll ingest that file to do some of the initial provisioning of the device, making sure that it's up and active and able to communicate onto the network. And more importantly, to reach out to its management instance. After that initialization process is complete, the firewall registers into Panorama, which then obviously provides centralized management for the firewall and for the policy itself. Panorama will then obtain the license for the VM series based on the appropriate entitlements, which will be automatically applied from the license pool itself. The VM series will then inherit the license from Panorama, along with all the necessary configuration, things like address objects, security policies, network templates, and everything else that's been defined within Panorama at that point. This ensures that the firewall is going to be configured and operating according to the organizational standards and best practices upon instantiation. So that's effectively what we're looking at when we're talking about the deployment phase. When we look at the configuration examples here, I want to give an example from a very large unnamed customer that had a very specific request. They came to us and they said, listen, if we have to use your GUI, we view that as a defect of the product itself. What they were ultimately looking for was to enable a self-service portal for the creation of security policy for IT teams and application developers, all without requiring any access to Panorama or PanOS user interface. So this customer had a very large and complex network environment with a diverse set of users and applications, varying skill sets, just like every team does. And it required a more efficient and streamlined way to manage the firewall policies. Now, in this specific use case, the customer was leveraging ServiceNow's ITSM capabilities to provide a self-service portal for creating and modifying security policy rules. So the workflow would look like the users would submit their policy requests through the portal, which would then automatically be processed and validated and to be ultimately pushed around to the remote firewall or management system through either the XML API or the REST API. And by using this ServiceNow as a self-service policy creation, the customer significantly reduced the burden on their network security team, while also ensuring that all the policy changes were properly audited and documented across the way. In addition to that, by leveraging Ansible and the PanOS APIs that we expose, this significantly helped reduce the errors and overall efficiency of the policy changing, making it easier for the customer to manage their network security policies at scale. This is actually what the six different steps of this workflow look like. Again, the user would visit ServiceNow. They would request a service security policy. There would be automated risk assessment performed within the workflows within ServiceNow based on the assets and based on the applications and other parameters required within their own organization. And they would ultimately be presented with an approval process for the appropriate network security stakeholders to say yay or nay. But if the policy was actually approved, then what would happen is that a request would go towards Ansible containing all the parameters within the self-service request. Ansible would actually push the policy to the remote firewalls, and then it would perform an audit on the firewalls to make sure that the policy was placed correctly and that it's operating as expected. And then finally, Ansible would perform the documentation of this actual new security policy. Again, making sure we have a paper trail as to who requested what at what specific time. A little bit more insights if you're curious as what this architecture would actually look like. Again, all of the ServiceNow requests, everything ServiceNow related happens within the public cloud. So sometimes there's a question of like, how do I get something on the public cloud to interact with something directly on-prem like my firewalls without poking holes everywhere within my security policy? Well, ServiceNow has this construct of what they call a mid-server, which basically is like either a Docker container. It's basically at the end of the day, it's a Java application that ServiceNow provides that can receive requests for automation from a specific ServiceNow instance. And then it passes it along to Ansible. Ansible will then check with GitHub or wherever you're storing your automation code to make sure it's got the latest copy of the automation project. And once it's got the latest copy of the code and all the parameters requested from ServiceNow, it then has everything it needs to do to push the policy to the remote firewall management service, perform the audit, and document those types of changes. So let's talk a little bit about responses. And I'm going to specifically give an example of an environment that is dealing with a lot of scaling up and scaling down. So within the modern application deployment world, What we're seeing is a lot more of ephemeral workloads. Maybe databases are instantiated to help with scale or performance, or additional web services or gateways or proxies are being instantiated on demand. And what this traditionally requires is that a network administrator would log in, identify the appropriate resource, capture its IP address, create a new address object, associate that address object to a address group, which would then be applied to a policy and perform a commit. Now, just talking through that, it doesn't seem like it's too bad, right? It might be able to something to take care of like 5 or 10 minutes. But again, the reality is that application workloads now are becoming much more ephemeral, especially in the containerization world, like with Kubernetes. So how do we get the network security team out of the process of having to keep on manually updating and adding these address objects as new services come online? Well, we worked closely with a partner of ours, HashiCorp, to build an integration with what they call CTS, or the Console Terraform Sync. And what happens in this specific use case is that whenever a specific workload comes online, a database, a web server, a DNS server, whatever it is, that service will register with Console, which will then tell Terraform how to interact with our API to register with that new address object with a specific tag. So again, it's taking advantage of the dynamic address group construct that we talked a little bit earlier before. And Terraform is performing the adds, moves, and changes within the environment as adds, moves, and changes are instantiated within the environment automatically without any type of commit operation at all. This effectively enables that the firewall policies and the address groups within there are always consistently updated on demand, effectively enabling customers to scale up and scale down with having to ring their network security team to make yet another security change to address objects in there. So really great way of responding to events taking place within the environment. And lastly, here on our last category around the idea around assessment automation here, there's a couple of use cases that I wanted to bring to surface here. The first is, again, talking a little bit about Cortex XOR, specifically about using it for remediation within the MITRE attack framework. And the idea here is that Cortex XOR is this automation and orchestration platform that enables you to integrate security tools and streamline incident responses. In using it within conjunction of the MITRE framework, what this enables you to do is effectively identify and respond to threats more quickly and effectively. And specifically here, Cortex can leverage this MITRE framework to automatically map observed threat behaviors and tactics and techniques, as well as provide remediation for those within your environment, effectively increasing your security posture across the environment. We actually publish the Cortex XOR playbooks for the MITRE framework online at pan.dev. So if you're interested in giving that a look and understanding how it can be incorporated with your environment, all that information in the playbooks are publicly available for you. But also talking about the assessment phase, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up Prisma Cloud again, because that is a core component of what this product actually provides us here. So Prisma Cloud, again, being this security platform for the cloud that enables you to quickly assess and manage your security compliance across your cloud infrastructure across multiple environments, including public, private, and hybrid clouds. One of its key capabilities is a vulnerability assessment, which enables you to quickly identify and remediate vulnerabilities in the cloud infrastructure before they can be exploited by the attackers themselves. And Prisma Cloud's vulnerability assessment capabilities, they enable you for continuous scanning and assessment of your cloud infrastructure for not only vulnerability, but also for configurations. And it also provides automatic remediation recommendations as well. So again, this can effectively help you prioritize your remediation efforts and make sure that your critical vulnerabilities are addressed in a timely and effective manner. Prisma Cloud also offers compliance reporting capabilities, enabling you to make sure that you are in compliance with the respective industries that you're participating in as well. And finally, I had to bring up Bridge Crew because we are talking about the world of automation, and this is a core component within the development of your infrastructure as code itself or your automation scripts within there. And what Bridge Crew can do is can help identify it can help enforce, I should say, a continuous cloud security posture by maintaining visibility and identifying misconfigured resources within just a single click itself. So it can find and fix infrastructure as code misconfigurations earlier and prevent risky deployments to track the configuration drift from your intended state. This is also embedded into our Prisma Cloud security service and also offers integrations into things like your text editors, your IDEs. There's plugins for things like Visual Studio Code, integrations into version control systems like GitHub Actions, into CI/CD pipelines as well, ticketing systems, and even beyond. So the idea, again, at the end of the day, is that before the code actually gets committed into a production environment, the Bridge Crew tools and services, such as the open source checkoff, has the capability of detecting your misconfigurations so that you can get a handle on them before they actually go into production. All right, and just to wrap up right here, right, we've covered quite a bit. So just to kind of rekindle everything and to put a nice little bow on top of all of this, we covered a lot of different topics today. Right? We talked about like an overview of network automation as a general, talked about the value that it brings, fundamental concepts, best practices, and what are some of the common techniques some of the common components within an organization that needs to be there in order to embrace automation. We also explored several different use cases of automation within the context of deployment, configuration, response, and assessment. And at the end of the day, we want to let you know that just by embracing the automation tools and frameworks that we've provided here, organizations can quickly improve the efficiency, remove the errors, and strengthen the overall network security posture. Now, I'll throw this out for you. If you'd like to have a deeper understanding of how these concepts can be applied to your specific organization, please reach out to your Palo Alto Networks account team and request the assistance of the consulting engineering group. Our team is available to engage in similar conversations and provide a guidance tailored to your specific needs. So again, thank you all for inviting me. My name was Calvin, and I hope this was a benefit for you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Calvin, for that presentation and all of those great examples. We did have one question come through the Q&A, if you would like to address that. It's we use Postman. Do you have a collection of the APIs that they can import?
So it depends on where you're looking for, right? We publish our API spec for our SaaS-based solutions like Prisma. So that's available in an open API spec, which can obviously be ingested by Postman, so that within just like a single import, you have availability to not only all the API calls and methods that are available, but also understanding like the appropriate response codes, the structure of the actual payload itself. So that is available for you. Regarding Panorama, I am not aware if a Postman collection does exist today for that purpose.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.